I would say I am an optimist, but I do not shy away from the truth.
Right.
I am obsessively curious and asking questions and facing the hard things, because I don't think you can have the beauty without that, the true beauty. You can skim on the surface of it, but you can't really feel it and just like from your gut. It makes me optimistic that there's deep wisdom out there that is very old and more than I could come up with myself. And I'm trying to slow down long enough to listen. And that makes me optimistic that it's not up to us, these pretty young creatures in the planetary kind of scope of time.
Yeah.
It's not up to us to figure it out all ourselves.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the show about optimism, progress, solutions, and problem solving in and around New Hampshire. My name is Andy DeMeo, and today we'll be coming to you from the Hannah Grimes Center for Entrepreneurship in Keene, New Hampshire, where I am talking to their very own illustrious and brilliant executive director, Juliana Dodson. We talk about economics, reinvigorating rural communities, authenticity, social capital, optimism, and many other things on this episode of Granite Goodness. I hope you enjoy it. Juliana Dodson, welcome to Granite Goodness.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, we were just chatting a minute ago, and you were saying that, people interview you often. You've been on podcasts before, but you appreciate the casual atmosphere and agenda of shows when they are that way. So tell me about that. Like, why do you prefer a more casual, conversational style over a more rigorous one, so to speak?
I think I like them both for different reasons, but one of the reasons I like open-ended conversations like this that don't necessarily have a strict agenda is because, and maybe other organizational leaders identify with this, but oftentimes you end up sort of regurgitating the same answers to questions over and over and over again.
Right.
And depending on how closely that aligns with what you're thinking about in the current moment or what you're dreaming of or what's getting you out of bed in the morning, you may end up not really talking about the things that are igniting you the most in that moment. Yeah. And so I oftentimes miss the opportunity to just kind of share what I'm thinking about. I like things like this.
You won't miss it today. What's igniting you right now? Like, why'd you get out of bed today?
Oh my gosh. Well, what always gets me out of bed is my children because they're get in bed with me and then I must wake up to feed them. I'm kidding, but also that's true.
That's a great reason.
Yeah. And my daughter actually had oral surgery this week. She had extra teeth in the roof of her mouth.
Okay.
So that was terrifying. One time she was like laughing and I was like, what is that? I was like, oh my gosh.
Is that new?
Yeah. Oh, it was new. And apparently it's like more common than folks realize, but
I've got 7 up here.
Really?
Yeah, thousands of teeth.
Yeah. I was like, wow. I've been kind of tending to her this week and everything, but she's recovering very quickly and is doing well. But work-wise, what's getting me out of bed? There's lots of terms for this, but I've been doing a lot of reading and studying about regenerative economic practices for the last couple of years.
I read your essay. You wrote an article about this, didn't you? Recently.
Did I?
I thought you did.
Are you talking about the LinkedIn post?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. In fact, I don't actually remember what I said in that. I think I was in like a fugue state and I was just like,
well, it was very thoughtful. I don't know. It was about workers and circular economy and like the value we put on labor and relationships and business. So, it's just it seemed like a relevant segue, but I know what you mean of like the fugue state of passion overtakes you and you're like, I don't even remember writing that.
I know. Well, was it the one about plastic too?
I think
was
so.
There? Yeah. So my kids and I are attempting to be plastic free this year.
Yeah.
And that's not the only thing that we're focusing on, but it's one thing that we're practicing because I feel like it will help us to get at some of the systemic issues that are going on because It just ties to a lot of other things. So while if you're thinking about like regenerative economic practices, there's other words for it too, like well-being economics, ecological economics. There's lots of terms for it. But if you're thinking about that, one of the aspects of that is scaling down on some aspects of our economy, some sectors of our economy. Because when we tend to talk about economic growth, it's oftentimes tied to GDP,
right.
or other measurements of growth that aren't necessarily tied to well-being.
Yeah.
The argument is that as GDP grows, well-being grows. And of course, in the industrial age, we've seen improvements in many different things related to quality of life and things like that. But I heard an analogy, and I wish I could remember the source. If you're like wandering in the woods and you realize you're lost, it's okay to turn around and like go back or try a different way.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that we've done is we have overshot with our growth.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you ever heard of that like happiness scale that like as you make more money, like it does bring more happiness oftentimes because you're getting safety, security, you're getting your basic needs met, that sort of thing. But then after a certain point, it like plateaus and then maybe even declines at some point.
Right.
And I think the growth trajectory is a little bit like that, where we needed growth and some places in the world still need growth.
Right.
But we are now to the point where we are overshooting. We are going past our planetary boundaries, and still somehow we are missing making sure that everyone has enough.
Yeah.
So how is it that we've had this unbelievable compound growth and yet not everyone has enough? And we're still, so many people are suffering, and we have wildlife declining, and we have oceans heating and acidifying and all this sorts of stuff. It's like something's not working.
Right.
And it's okay to say, oh, okay, we tried this. We know, now we need to adjust. And how do we need to adjust? And so I've been thinking a lot about that. And so with the idea that some sectors should really be scaling down while others should be scaling up, that was part of the post that I wrote on LinkedIn, was about, consumption of, I'm trying to use professional language.
No, you can.
of things that we don't need.
I can bleep it out. That's usually what I do if people want to swear.
Useless shit.
Yeah.
We don't need useless shit.
Yeah.
And that, what is being taken from the planet and what's actually being gained through like little plastic trinkets, as was the example I gave in there.
Right.
I was just like, how is it that every birthday party, every doctor's appointment, every school, whatever, they come home with these things, and then I have the moral obligation to try to figure out what to do with them.
What do I do with this thing?
Yes, and it's not actually good for human health either. The plastics and the microplastics in the air and the water and the soil and everything. It's endocrine disrupting. It's killing us slowly. But a lot of times, like I said, we try things in our progressing and evolving society.
Right.
And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. I mean, even in the Roman times, the wealthy would eat lead because it was sweet.
Right.
And they were like, this is the elite sweetener.
Yeah.
And only the wealthy have this sweetener. And it was driving them mad.
Right.
And so eventually we found out, lead's not actually good for us. So as an example, like plastics, like we're kind of like, I can't believe. And what we have gained from them is good in some ways, in the sense that like medical equipment and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's nothing, most things are not unlimited, right? So just like we might have a budget for our money.
Yeah.
We should have a budget for our energy, a budget. So if we are going to produce and use plastics for things that are really essential, maybe we try to avoid them in other things so we can kind of stay within a budget. So I don't know. I don't know where I'm falling on all this, but it is something that I think about a lot. And one of the reasons I think about it is because I know that inevitably things will change. And the world that we know right now will not be the world that's here in 50 years or 100 years or 200 years, whatever it is. And so the work that I do as a human being, which happens to be at Hannah Grimes right now and has been other places before and might be other places in the future. The work that I want to do is to help relieve suffering in the current and prepare for the world that we're going to see in the future.
Yeah.
And that can be done in so many different ways. And Hannah Grimes is really working on some key elements of that. But I think we can all be doing that. We can all be. That's one of the great things about your podcast is that you are speaking with people who are doing what they can to relieve suffering, to build the world that we want to see in the future. And one of the philosophies that Hannah Grimes has always had, thanks to our founder, Marianne, is one at a time. So it could be one entrepreneur at a time, one idea at a time, one nonprofit at a time. And it works.
Yeah.
We at Hannah Grimes, we are not necessarily about mass quantity, but we are about quality and relationship and connection. And it's worked for us.
Yeah. Well, I heard someone say once that great network building, right, is not about, it's not necessarily about scaling at all costs, but it's more about deepening the relationships that are there, right? It's about depth, not breadth, so to speak.
Yeah, like scaling out versus scaling up.
Yeah.
And that's a lot about what I'm talking about with what I'm learning about regenerative economics is it's not always about upward growth, right?
Yeah.
It can be about lateral growth, and it can be about depth, and it can be about revisiting the things that we once did that really worked. Right. And we try new. Human beings are innovative,
right,
and iterative by nature. And so if we try something and it works, awesome. If we try something and it doesn't work, try again. But if it doesn't, okay, we rethink. We're smart, and we should rethink if something isn't working.
Yeah, I love everything that you said just now. Seriously, no, I mean it is really nice. Everyone is smart, I think, who comes on the show, right? And but you have dived straight into the enchilada, Juliana. I'm completely serious. When I talk about the whole enchilada, which is a phrase that I overuse on this show, this is what I mean. I am completely serious right now.
Yeah.
No, really, like this big question: how do we square modernity, right, and all the material abundance, that we have, mostly in the West and the rich countries, right? What's great, like what's good about that formula of productivity, growth, incentives for innovation, right? Like what are all the ways that the marketplace in whatever sector or industry is really great and really efficient at solving problems, and what are ways that mechanism is maybe maladapted for the world at large, right? Like
exactly.
If you like a good example maybe is we have caloric abundance, right? There are less famines today than there were 100 years ago by a wide margin, and like that's great. No one is pro famine. We're all on the same team on this, right? But that
is one of the quotes we need to pull out from this. No one's pro-famine, right?
Yeah.
What if someone comes out and they're like, well, you didn't consider me, I'm pro-famine. We're like, okay, who is this person?
Maybe this is a bygone Roman dieting trend, like lead. Right?
Like lead.
Actually, the famines are in right now. But no, I mean, there's, like, as you point out, like, this is why I love talking about this stuff with people who think big picture like you, right? Is like, so often it's easy to miss all the ways. Again, the show's about optimism, right? There are all these different ways that like material progress and quality of life have gotten really, really good. Like so much better in the last 200 years. And
exactly.
Famine's one, child mortality is another, right? No one is pro child mortality.
Yeah.
More kids making it to age 5 and beyond. Great.
Yeah.
We love that, right?
Well, and can I just caveat, like human life has gotten better.
That's right. Yes. Right. That's been at a cost. Well, I'm so happy right now. This is the beauty of getting really into like the notion of progress, right? Like what does it mean for this thing to have gotten better? And it's like, sure, sanitation, education levels, the sexual revolution, famine, child mortality, right? Like all those things have gotten better, but how did it happen, right? What was good about the Industrial Revolution and the Scientific Revolution, all these things. And, there may be progress in some areas, but nothing's automatic and it's not everywhere all at once, right? Like, as you mentioned, so much of that has come, and you can debate, right? Have a really good argument and discussion about like, this is a good trade-off to make, right? Of, we want to consume these environmental resources because it's going to help develop our economy this way. Does the way that it happened in the past have to be the way that it happens today everywhere? Like, not necessarily, right? Like, this is the beauty of tech. It can help people leapfrog. Like 100 years ago, it was all, whale oil. That's how we lit up cities. And now we don't have to do, like, we have electricity.
We're going to come back to the whale at some point. I just want you to know. Continue.
Good. We're in the enchilada now, but we will return to the whale.
Hopefully it's dairy and gluten free for me.
Yeah, of course. But no, I mean, just all these things put together, like, these are the conversations that, to be completely frank, I am most interested in having with people, right? Is like squaring, man, humans, like, I'm pro people. Like, I don't think it would be great for us to just be like, let's just all decide to end human beings. Like, I don't think that's a path forward, right?
I'd say I'm pro Homo sapien too.
Yeah, right.
So we're on the same page about that.
That's good. Yeah. We're pro people. But I would definitely, and again, I don't know anyone who's like, I'm pro the worst parts of people.
Yeah.
Let's take all the awful characteristics of human beings and be like, let's amplify those. But like, people are innovative. Most of the time, I think they're kind and they're well-meaning. And it's just like, man, these systems where we interact, they're very complicated. And how do we harness what's best about people to get to better net positives for humans and all the non-humans?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and not at cost of other living beings that are just as important as we are.
Yeah.
Plants, animals, all of it. So a couple things to note. One is that I want to revisit, so I've mentioned revisiting the whale, and I want to revisit efficiency and progress at some point too. But before then, one of the other things I really wanted to talk about, and I intentionally did not spend a lot of time thinking about it ahead of time.
Okay.
And every time it popped in my head, I was like, nope, wait till I'm talking with Andy, because I like the active process of fleshing out ideas and exploring ideas. And I want to talk about positivity and optimism.
Yeah.
And so I'll tell you an experience that I had this year. And then ever since then, I was like, that's what I want to talk about with Andy.
This is so good. You're doing all the work for me. This is great.
Oh, thanks. So well, let me tell you,
Are we starting with the whales?
No, we'll come back to the whales. Since you already talked with Caroline about Radically Rural, I would just say to folks, like, go back and listen to Caroline's interview. It was awesome. And it was one of the coolest experiences for me to see two people who
we never met.
Yeah. And who aren't like staff of Hannah Grimes or the Sentinel or anything like that, like having a full conversation about Radically Rural. It was so cool. It was like, we didn't have anything to do with that. And it just happened.
It was organic.
Exactly.
A spontaneously emerging conversation of positivity and possibility in rural New Hampshire, you might say, which I feel like is kind of part of the dream for what Radically Rural is,
Yeah, and I've heard so many stories lately about all the threads from Radically Rural and what that has been doing for folks, which is another thing we could revisit. Like, just spoke with a woman in Nevada and everything that's going on there now. Someone in Louisiana. I mean, the list just goes on and on. But it was a really delightful experience. So go back and listen to that if you want to hear more about Radically Rural. But essentially what Radically Rural has been known for is positive deviance, using those solutions and models that work and elevating those and saying, if these are conditions and problems that most of us are dealing with and there's been a solution to that or someone has addressed that really well, let's elevate that. Maybe others could replicate it, iterate it. And if there hasn't been a solution to it, let's get together and figure it out. But it's been very positive and forward-leaning. And as Marianne would have said, like, no wringing of the hands over broadband, which is like what used to happen a lot in rural. And understandably, but it's like, rather than spending time just kind of dwelling in it, like, let's figure it out, right? Yeah. And so Radically Rural's really been known for that and being on the cutting edge of arts and clean energy and land use and journalism and entrepreneurship and main streets and like health, and the list goes on for rural communities. And it's worked brilliantly and it's been great. And we oftentimes will use the model of getting these folks together from all over the country to shape and share ideas about rural life for things that we in our region need to be figuring it out.
Right.
Because why not use this platform and resource to support us in what we're doing too? As an example, Yesterday we hosted a national virtual roundtable. We had like 70 registrations. We had about almost 40 people come, which is normal. A lot of people register to get the link to the recording, but we were able to invite folks from Missouri, Mississippi, and South Dakota to talk about their experiences with navigating big downtown disruptions and downtown overhauls, because we are about to go through in Keene a big downtown infrastructure where they rip up Main Street. And so are a lot of our businesses, and those who support small businesses are, of course, worried about the businesses. And the city is navigating this complicated process. Yeah. So we were able to host this national conversation about it and got some of the best ideas, like tips, tricks, resources. We have a shared Google Drive folder that's essentially like open source commons, like, hey, take what you need, use what you need. Nobody needs to recreate the wheel. Yeah. And we had the City of Keene staff and others from the downtown group on there, along with people from all over the country who are about to embark on this or have embarked on this before. So it was fantastic.
You share, sorry to interrupt, I'm just like, I'm so curious. Could you share an example of like, I don't know, an aha moment of like, hey, other small rural towns who have, gone through the breach, so to speak, of like these downtown overhauls, like, I know you can't distill it into one big takeaway, but like what in your view was like a great enduring piece of wisdom that you would be like, oh, wow, it's great that we now understand this as Keene?
I'm going to rapid fire a few because it was really fun.
Yeah.
So one was burn the cone. So the community in South Dakota that had gone through this, it was this arduous process that was just fraught with challenges. One of those challenges, I don't want to freak anyone out, but one of those challenges we were like so grateful they brought up, because a lot of people didn't know this, and I think including us, which was when they were going through their project, a couple of the water main lines had broken and flooded some basements of businesses. And the project's insurance didn't cover that. Once you cross the threshold into the business, that's on the business owner. Yeah. So one of the things that the city is now going to be doing is going around to downtown business owners, making sure they have the right kinds of insurance to cover. I mean, as far as I guess, based on the questions they were asking, that's something we're like, okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. Now we can go and do that. And that could save someone so much money. It could be the difference between their business being around or not. So like things like that were like essential to find out. But when we were talking about that, because they had been through this like incredibly stressful, very long process, they're essentially building a giant construction cone that they're all going to burn together.
Oh, and like, so it's literal.
A literal burning of the cone.
Like a Burning Man.
Yes. And they're like, it's going to be very like cathartic, and like everyone's like, oh, it's done, you know, and we did it, and like it's like non-toxic materials, and the fire department's in on it, and everybody, it's all good, but it's like they're actually doing this as their big concluding thing to the project. There was another one actually it's the community that is the home of that show on, I think it's on HGTV, which I have not watched, but a lot of people are very excited about it. I think it's called
Property Brothers.
Nope. It's called like Hometown.
Sure.
Do you know that one?
I know there's a many. My mom would know it. She's going to call me after this and be like, it was this show. So and one of the other panelists apparently is like obsessed with the show. So she was fangirling the whole time. It was great. But anyway, it's their place in Laurel Main Street in Mississippi. And they have gone through one of two phases of their project. And the way they did it the first time, they tried to keep one side of the street open at all times. So they did one side of the street and they flipped into the other side of the street to kind of trying to keep traffic going. And she's like, it probably doubled the time that the project took. Wow.
She's like, going back, we would absolutely just rip the Band-Aid off, do the whole block at one time, and be done with it. And our business owners for the next phase are on board with that because they saw how long it took. And it ended up, I think, being more expensive too and stuff. So that was like a great takeaway, just like block, rip the Band-Aid off. But to that end, there was a group one of the attendees was from another state, I can't remember, and she was asking, if you do one side of the street and then the other, how can you support the businesses that are on the side of the street that are blocked? Yeah. And so we like brainstormed some ideas, like maybe like sister businesses or pop-ups, or like how to, where one side of the street is like, I'm your buddy business. And like, then when it's my turn and we switch, you support me and send people my way. And, like things like that. One person talked about like bringing donuts around like actually walking in businesses and encouraging them and saying, do not worry, we will get through this. And like, you know, she's like, the more face-to-face that you can do, the more levity you can bring to the situation. Communication was the number one takeaway. Communicate, make it really specific and detailed. Anyway, there was just so many good takeaways that I really loved from that. But that would be an example of using our platform to benefit our region directly for some of the things that we have to go through too.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. If we have things we've been through that we can share with our national community, then we should do that. And so for the last, this brings me back to my original point, which is for the last 3 years, I think, one of the things that I've said when I've done my plenary comments at the summit is like, this platform exists for all of you, everyone attending.
Right.
If there's something that you want to talk about or that you want to see, or that maybe you actually need to use this time to assemble people that you've needed to get together for another reason, use our platform, right? Because organizing a summit is an incredible amount of work.
Right.
Like, my gray hairs will tell you that. And why not use what we've already organized?
Yeah.
Right. So we almost had there were some, a group of Black columnists who were writing columns from rural America and different parts of the country. And they wanted to get together and it almost came through for them to use Radically Rural just as their gathering point. So they didn't have to worry about logistics. They could just show up, and it's something they needed to do anyway. Yeah. And so anyway, I've been offering that to folks for a couple of years. And then leading up to this year, because I've been wrestling with with concepts about the economy and how can we, like, I know that the contributions that we're making to our community are good, and they have been all along the way. How can we shift our trajectory to be even better, you know, for people, for planet, for the future? And I've been wrestling with these concepts so much. And I was like, hold on. I've been offering to everyone else, like, use our platform for what you need.
Yeah.
I need this. Like, I need to gather some people together to talk about regenerative economies.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I need. And why not use my own platform, right?
Yeah.
So we tacked on this, like, it's usually Wednesday, Thursday, and we tacked on this Friday morning session, which was intended to be casual, cozy. Like, we knew not many people would stay afterward. Maybe a dozen might stay to have this conversation. But I wanted to gather a group of rural leaders who were interested in transforming their economic practices to get together and talk about it. So the whole summit was, like, in my view, which I know I'm biased, was pretty transformative and powerful this year. And we had a lot of folks telling us that. And every year that we do it, because we have repeat folks and we have this amazing national advisory group now and stuff, it feels more and more like a small town.
Right.
Like, people are hugging each other when they see each other. They're like leaning on each other during the year. So many amazing outcomes. And it just felt like not perfect, but amazing. Then we have this Friday morning session, which is what I've really been wanting to talk about. I don't remember exactly how many people, but I think we had almost 50 people.
So it's more than 12 or whatever.
More than 12. And we only had, like, fewer than 20 people register.
Wow.
So I had brought, like, pillows and blankets, and I was like, come in your jammies. Like, let's just, you know, relax and talk about the economy and eat donuts, you know, because...
Don't not worry.
Well, because there's, but also because there's something called donut economics, which is a good, like...
Yes.
So we're
Great
like,
book.
let's eat donuts and talk about donut economics, you know. And I was so overwhelmed I cried.
Oh.
It was kind of embarrassing. I'm like, maybe I was tired too, but, you know, everyone went around. They talked about why they introduced themselves and talked about why they were there. And it was like so many people had been craving to talk about this, and there was no place to be talking about this in traditional economics. And so I was so overcome. I literally cried. I was like, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. And I feel so lucky to be in a group of people that are willing to openly talk about this.
Yeah.
And so we had this amazing presentation from my dear friend and author and educator, Nicole Savita, with EcoGather. But the presentation was very comprehensive, and we didn't have time to get to discussion because the introductions had been so, like, anyway.
Yeah.
So we also didn't expect that many people to come. And so we said, you know, we're going to put together some study groups to keep talking about this, which we're still working on. And we did host some gatherings afterward. Anyway, I was so overcome. I was on cloud 9 afterward.
Yeah.
I was like, this is one of the most positive and optimistic, coming back to that.
That's right.
Experiences that I've had because, and again, I intentionally didn't flesh this out ahead of time because I wanted to do it in real time. And I'm trying to identify why that was so positive and optimistic to me.
It was a manifestation of, as you said, I mean, clearly this is a thing or a string of topics that, you think a lot about, even just like, I mean, your personal intellectual interests obviously greatly overlap with your official role here at Hannah Grimes, right? But like these values and questions of like progress and all these things, like it's clearly something that you've spent a lot of time thinking about. And I totally know what you mean in terms of like, oh, when I actually got all these people here together, for the first time in a novel setting to talk about this thing that like I think about a lot, and it's not just me.
Yeah.
And to get there and create the space where it's like you can be vulnerable and serious and talk about it. Like, I don't know what, like when you manifest a thing that's like special to you, of course you cry.
Yeah.
Like it's just, it's the joy, fear, everything reaction, that shows like, whoa, this mattered a lot to me. Right.
Yeah.
And I love how you talk about it too, because it's such a cool expression of what I love, what you all do here at Hannah Grimes, right? Hearing you talk about both sides of it, right? Like we like the conversations about rural community and rural business and rural possibility, right? Kind of like my chat with Caroline about, hey, solutions to these things. So often it's about, can we just take advantage of resources that are already there, right? Like this phrase that,
asset-based.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Asset-based thinking, and, that solutions to our problems can spontaneously emerge, right? But it's like not spontaneous, right? It's all these people coming together, as you say, at the conference, right? Like both things are true. Organizing a conference is a tremendous amount of work, right?
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't happen by accident. But when you do it right, it allows the channeling of a thing that is like should be naturally occurring, right? Like clearly all these people, these 50 people were looking for a place and a time and a community and a setting to come together and talk about donut economics or all these different things, but they hadn't had it yet. And you maybe hadn't had it yet. And then when they did have it, it was like, oh, it was here all the time. This desire to share and to talk about it. And we didn't know until Juliana Dotson put this place together for us, right? And so it's like, it's both. I love examples like that. And I feel like that's a nutshell, like that truly is a microcosm of like what you do all the time everywhere for here in Keene and for this region of the state and your place in the national organization of rural communities. But like that combination of you curate it and you have to build the right structure, but if it's right, you can channel all the best parts of like these things that are naturally occurring and good in human communities, right? Innovation, cooperation, experimentation, the desire to share and empathize with other people, right? So it's like, and it's none of it's by accident.
Yeah.
So I love everything.
And you're
you
like
said.
Creating conditions, right? And there's a couple of analogies I've used to talk about radically rural before. So like a garden bed, right? Like we're cultivating the soil, we're preparing the garden bed, we're bringing it together, and like what gets planted is really up to the folks that show up and are there. Or like another analogy I've used is like a chef, right? Like you bring together the recipe, the ingredients, but depending on how much of each one you put in or what ingredients you're using, it changes the outcome. And so the folks who come and those who participate are the essential ingredients. Like it wouldn't work if we created conditions, but there were no ingredients that showed up, So it's like, it's not just us, but it does matter that we have and are continuing to gain this skill of creating conditions that are ripe for these sorts of things. So more thoughts popped up for why that felt positive and optimistic to me. But afterward, I felt hope for the first time. And well, that's not true. I feel hopeful a lot, but I felt this deep hope that on a systemic level, we could potentially make progress on some of these things and that I wouldn't be alone in it.
Right.
And so I felt incredibly positive leaving there. And then we got our survey feedback.
Yeah.
And it was so fascinating because there were two sort of gutsy presentations that we did. Mm-hmm. That one on the Friday morning, and then our closing. And I can come back to the closing if you want to talk about that one. But it was, I know we have a lot to visit. Yeah. And it was interesting because, you know, vast majority of people were just like over the moon about all of it. And then there was like this handful of folks that like loved one of the presentations we had, which was our most on the circuit speaker, Mark Brackett. He talks a lot about mental health and feelings, and his book is Permission to Feel. But he is like definitely an on the circuit speaker, like has done this many times. And so the handful of people that felt really strongly either way, like tended to love him and like hate the closing. Right. And if they went to the Friday morning session, that one too, or love the closing in the Friday morning session and didn't like the more like kind of on the circuit speech. So it was interesting. It was like the outliers felt really strongly either way. But one of them gave a comment about the Friday morning session, and I ended up having a 3 or 4 follow-up conversations with him, and like we've had great conversations, and I really like respect him. So if he's listening, what's up? And
it's Mark.
Well, it's not Mark. It's someone that attended.
Oh, okay.
And gave survey feedback.
Yeah.
And so like I won't mention their name, but we've had great conversations, and like, you know, all good. Very much respect him. But his comment was like, he said, I've been so obsessed with Radically Rural that people in my life have like all but told me to shut up about it. He's like, I just love it so much. I can't get enough of it. I've never known a group to do as good of a job organizing a summit, you know, on and on and on. And he's like, and I've always felt so positive leaving there. He's like, and I was like, what a downer to end the summit on this Friday, this kind of tack on Friday morning session that we had. And he was like, just absolutely hated it, you know? And he's like, we aren't going to have like, you know, 40 something people in a room and solve the economy in a matter of 2 hours. Like, you know, and he was just like, what a downer, you know? And so I thought about that a lot, because it's like, I don't mind getting criticism. Like, I think it's good because I told him that I was like, I want to hear as much from the people who like didn't have a good experience as those who did. And he did, you know, the rest of the summit, he had a good experience, but it was like, tell me more about that. Like, because to me, I had felt the most positive and hopeful leaving there, that I was like, this idea of what is positive and what is optimistic and what is hopeful has been kind of rolling around in my mind. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about it. So I'm like, because to him, he was just like, because we can't solve this, or there isn't kind of this easy answer, then it's not positive.
Interesting.
And so, and in my mind, it was like, because this is this incredibly complex, crushing, overwhelming thing that we need as a human race to figure out very like 40, 50 years ago, you know, we should have figured it out. It's like not being alone in it, and having other people there with me and having this rich, amazing conversation, even though I knew it wasn't going to be solved in that amount of time, it felt hopeful and optimistic to me. And I also thought of one more thing that might have felt hopeful and optimistic to me, which is that, and this is like super, I don't know if I've ever shared this on a podcast, so it's pretty vulnerable.
This is what we're here for.
But everyone has like their triggers, right?
Sure.
To like what really activates their nervous system. My biggest nervous system activator, like I'm already getting activated thinking about it, is being in trouble.
Oh, okay.
Do you have the in trouble trigger?
When I get called Andrew, I do. Oh. Because I go by Andy, but my name's Andrew. And the only people who call me Andrew is my mom and my wife when they're upset. So I'll make sure to be like, thanks, Andrew, for this. You're like, oh. What did I do? So I relate a little bit.
Yeah, like I just, you know, without going into detail, there's very good reason why that is like a trigger for me. But so anytime, and because I grew up in like a very, 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 very specific religious environment, there was a lot of what is right, what is wrong. You have an existing mold of truth that you know to be true, and then everything that you hear, read, see, speak, feel, whatever gets poured into that existing mold. So I didn't.
Absolute.
Yeah, exactly. And I didn't really, and not all religious groups are like that by any means, but the one that I was a part of was. That was my experience. And so because talking about the economy, anything other than this like existing like
paradigm
that we're in can get people like upset,
right.
Then I was a little scared that it was risky, right?
Yeah.
And that I was like, is this going to like drive people away from our community? Is this going to create conflict in our local relationships? Like I was, and I did it anyway, but I was kind of nervous, and I didn't want that in trouble feeling, of like getting angry emails or getting this or that. And I think we handled it beautifully, because they're human issues that shouldn't be controversial, but they often are.
Right.
And so I think one of the other things is not only did we have people from all over the country there saying, thank you so much for talking about this. We haven't had a place to talk about it. We had a lot of local people there.
Yeah.
People that I know and that I see in my daily life. And it makes me like tear up just thinking about it. But like, people from Southwest Region Planning Commission, the Monadnock Interfaith Project. I mean, like one of our funders for Hannah Grimes, like, we had like different people there, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is amazing, and I'm not in trouble. And like, I don't know. It was like, that's kind of maybe a childish way to talk about it. But
no, I
think that's one of the reasons it felt good to me.
I don't think so. I think it's more childish not to talk about it, honestly, right? It's like this idea that it's counterproductive or, morally wrong to be like, hey, let's question this thing. Like, it's so silly, the absolutism, right? Particularly of like economic dogma. And we don't have to go there. I will say, I'm sure that gentleman made good points, and, you were right to take them in and be like, thanks for the feedback. But the word radical is in the title. Right?
But it
like
is
it's
more
on
of
the
like,
tin,
it's what is that, an adjective or an adverb?
I know. I think, is it more like cowabunga, like radical, like let's be like
well,
the 70s?
It's the radically is describing the word rural. So like, really, it's saying we're very rural.
Oh, I see.
Radically rural.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
So that's actually really interesting, because again, having not gone, and I'm absolutely going to go this year, and it's going to be a great time, and I'm going to talk to a bunch of people. It'll be we'll probably have like a booth somewhere where I'll just sit down, and we could make it a whole Grant of Goodness production. It'd be great. But when I first heard about it, and maybe because I first heard about it through our mutual friend Jules, who is radical in all these great ways.
Oh yeah, they're amazing.
Always pushing, and
they've helped us so much with our accessibility, by the way.
Yeah, and I guess because I heard about it through that way, in my head I was like, oh, this is about like, and I know it's maybe a little tongue in cheek, but I had thought it was more like a cultural or political, like about, like this is about radically, I don't know,
radical ideas.
Yeah, radical ideas, right? And maybe it is too, but it's just funny the way people find their way to these things.
And I do think there is a little bit of dual meaning, because I wouldn't say it was originally created, because I actually wasn't here when it was originally created. I didn't join until three years after that. But when it was originally created, like, there was probably a dual meaning in the sense that they are radical ideas, but not in the sense like politically radical or something like that. Like, I guess it depends on your definition of radical. And I know that like one of my favorite things to think about is that it comes originally from I'm not going to get this right. The part of the plant that like, there's a part of the plant, but there's actually like a going down as well as going up. It's like, so it's like, it's about like, digging into the roots as well as like.
Yeah. Flowering upward.
Exactly. Yeah. But all that to say, a lot of folks do think that when they hear the name, and I think we're growing into it naturally. Yeah. Because it has always been about ideas. And one of the things that I love about Hannah Grimes is it's always met the moment. And when it was founded in 1997, the marketplace, it met the moment. Yeah. There was a need for a local marketplace. The buy local movement hadn't kicked off yet, right? And so all along the way in its evolutions, it's always met the moment. And what we have been doing by more intentionally in the last couple of years by using our framework and our resources to solve pressing community issues where we're contributing to efforts on childcare and housing and climate and all these sorts of things. That is us meeting the moment. Yeah. And in my mind, having these conversations about the system that we're living in and what's working and what's not working about it, that is doing what we need to do and doing what we've always done and evolving to meet the moment.
Yeah.
And so we were leaders. We are recognized leaders in things like relocalizing.
Right.
And I think that we will be recognized leaders, among others, not alone, in regenerative economic practices applied to rural communities.
Yeah.
And that is something that I feel so strongly about, that I don't think anything could dissuade me from it. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to continuing to do this work among other folks who are doing it too, because one of the things that I've noticed is a problem in our world is this desire to like own
Sure.
and hoard.
Yeah.
And that could be ideas, it could be stuff, it could be whatever. It
could be people.
Yeah. And so I don't want to, it's not a desire to like own like a new method or a new terminology or a new way to do things. I want to use what we have and gather what is already there and then help it to flourish and help it to expand and grow. And that is something impossible to do alone. I mean, Robin Wall Kimmerer's most recent book, The Serviceberry, is a really beautiful book. And in all her books, she talks about webs of interconnectedness. Mm-hmm. That is how all life exists, webs of interconnectedness. And that is what we need for now and in the future. And it reminded me, one of the things you were saying earlier about one of the reasons that session I think felt so impactful to me. I watched a video the other day, what it looks like when neurons connect. Have you ever seen that?
I don't know that I have.
It was so funny. It was like they were kind of like wiggling toward each other like, meh.
Sure.
And then eventually they're like, and it kind of felt like that, you know, like we create the conditions, we bring them together, but then it was just like this, it's happening kind of feeling.
It's like awesome. When you meet someone at a party and then you're like, oh, do we get along? Oh, we do get along, you know? Exactly. And it's a wonderful feeling, you know? It's a wonderful feeling. No, I love everything you're saying, you know, and I in particular want to comment on, you know, the notion you mentioned of like, I understand where people like the gentleman are coming from, where it's like, I hesitate to feel good talking about this because it's all I'm hearing about is like what's not working about this big system that feels too large for any of us to influence, right? But the ethos of granite goodness, right, which I think you're amenable to, and you've implied as much, is that, you know, it's not about everything solved.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here. That's why we're here. That's why people question progress and like solutions on these things. But then the idea that I'm trying to get across is like for almost everything you can think of, someone is working on it, right? Yeah. And you know, it's not perfect today, but a lot of the times it's probably better than it used to be. It can be better than it is now, right? And it's like both things are true. And so it's, you know, I really relate to, you know, this idea of yours of like, actually the conversation is part of the progress and is a thing to celebrate and like really enjoy, because that's often the first step, and it's an absolutely crucial step, right? It's like, hey, it's not perfect, it's not solved today, but you know, people are thinking about it, and you're not the only one.
Exactly. And a lot of the folks that you've spoken with, hold on, I'm going to move this. A lot of the folks that you've spoken with and a lot of the projects you've talked about, you're not necessarily seeing the messy middle or all the conversations that led up to that.
Oh, yeah.
And I did reference the closing session before. It was so beautiful. Even if only half the folks in the audience really connected with it. It was a speaker we had, Shaylin Romney-Garrett, who has been on the speaking circuit and spoken hundreds of times. She worked with Robert Putnam, who is a very well-known social scientist.
And doesn't he live
in Jaffrey?
Oh my God. I got to get him on the show.
Yeah. So our whole, that actually, we could have a whole conversation. Maybe we should schedule another conversation, but I'm inviting myself.
I accept.
But that whole thing about like reweaving the social fabric, you know, social capital, all that was our theme for last year's Radically Rural. And so we screened the documentary Join or Die the night before. And The Upswing was his latest book, and Shaylin Romney-Garrett was his co-author. She is originally from Utah, but she moved here even though Utah actually does have high social capital, she moved here because of the social capital, really, that was here. And she might, if you ever have her on the show, she might have other reasons for moving here as well. I can't quite remember, so apologies.
I love talking to people who are from here and the people who moved here. Like, they bring a good perspective of both, right?
So she's been on the speaking circuit like for years and has spoken hundreds of times. And she agreed to do the closing for us, even though she hasn't been taking as many speaking engagements lately. But leading up to it, in the months and months leading up to it, she was really struggling because the concepts that she had been sort of touting for all these years, she was becoming less and less comfortable with, that they weren't panning out how she originally thought.
Sure.
And she was really torn up about it inside. But she was afraid to kind of trial something new because she never had before.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, if there's ever going to be a time that you're going to trial something new, do it with us.
Yeah.
Like, we are open to, we don't want just the regurgitated stuff. Like, we want what's real, like what's bubbling up in you, what's authentic. What have you learned in the last few years? And it ended up getting to the point where she was struggling so much, almost like, Lillian, if you're listening, of course, you're going to laugh at me using a birthing analogy because I always use birthing analogies.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're giving birth. And
I know exactly what that's like.
Right? Just like you said, do you ever go in the bathroom and realize your mustache is all askew? And I'm like,
Who
of course.
doesn't? Yeah.
That happens to me all the time. So, and you go into transition. So any women that, birthing people that have given birth will know, like, when you get to transition, you get to the point where you're like, I can't. I'm going to die.
Right.
This is just not going to happen. This is impossible. Like, I can't do it. And that's when you know that it's actually finally going to happen. And that's kind of what it was like for her, like birthing this new way of talking and thinking about it, to the point where even the lunch before the closing session, she was still not sure exactly how she was going to approach it. And my friend Nicole, who I referenced before, and I went to lunch with her. We talked. We said, do you want us to be there with you? Just rather than it being like you going through this alone on stage, do you want us to sit with you and go through this? And she said yes. So we joined her on stage.
Yeah.
We went through this. I have goosebumps because it was so beautiful. And I knew in that moment, even if nobody in the audience understands like what we're doing, this is worth it for her.
Yeah.
Because you remember me saying, one person at a time, one idea at a time. And I knew that this was worth it for her, regardless. And I thought it was so beautiful. I don't remember why I was talking about that at all.
Well, one person. Listen, it's the whole enchilada. It's the whole enchilada. Listen, we're actually pretty much almost at time.
Oh my
gosh. And I'm so
gosh.
upset because I could talk to you forever.
I know. Too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let me try to wrap up my thought. So, So right before that, we were talking about social capital.
People moved here. Robert Putnam, join or die. The birthing, the turn, changing.
Oh, now you got my mind a whole different place with the birthing. Yes, it was about social capital and social weaving. Darn. Okay. Well, I forgot it, but
that's okay.
Yeah, it was a good closing session, and we need to work on our social capital. No,
you tied it back. No, it's all relevant. Listen, I'm around for the rest of the day if you want.
What time is your next one end?
1.
I could keep talking after that, actually, if you want.
You're in such a good flow.
I know, the flow state, right?
I feel like we could get, I mean, I could talk to you for 10,000 hours. I can already tell, but I feel like another like 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, 20, 30 minutes would be good.
Okay.
Yeah.
To be continued.
To be continued.
At this point, Juliana and I took a 2-hour break. During that time, my interview with another Granite Goodness guest, Maria Finnegan, was interrupted by a visit from Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander, who Maria and Juliana kindly introduced me to. I resumed my chat with Juliana later that afternoon.
Here we go. Okay, so basically what happened is...
Very stylish, by the way.
Thank you. Train fell off the tracks. I couldn't remember my point. Then we had to go. Now we're back. And
that's not how I remember it, but...
Yeah, it's been such a long time, so we're going to catch up.
Like
we
2
haven't
hours.
seen each other in a long time. And
how you been?
There's been a new hairstyle. The sun's going down. I have notes.
We are changed people.
Yeah. So basically, what happened is, you had another podcast. I had Maggie Goodlander come in here, and
yes,
she stopped in to meet you, and that was so fun.
Oh, very kindly. Yeah. Well, for the listeners, and I hope people listen to these like all on a block, because it's been a really fun day here for me. I came in and, you mentioned the congresswoman was coming to visit, and I was like, oh, maybe I can arrange, like I can sneeze in front of her by accident somehow and she'll notice me and ask what Granite Goodness is. And you're like, what if I just introduced you formally? Like, I would be happy to do that. And I was like, would you really? So, wonderful Maria Finnegan, right? That's her name, who I was just talking to, she knew Maggie already, and, they came in and, quote unquote interrupted. I mean, it was like a funnily arranged, like we knew it was going to happen, but, you were so kind to, bring the congresswoman in here, and we got to meet her team, and she was curious about what I'm doing and what I'm doing here. And it was a very New Hampshire moment. Let's just say that. It
was. And that's what I was saying, while the three of you, me and Maria were chatting before she left, is like, that's how things get done.
Yeah.
And anyone in community building work knows that it's those moments of we're all doing our own weaving of the threads in our own world, and then those threads get weaved together, and it just keeps building this beautiful picture, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And so why not share the love? Why not like introduce her to such a great project and have you have a chance to connect with her and Maria again as well. So it was perfect. We had a blast.
Well, it's a very good, a lot of our conversation earlier in my view, like, you were talking about, hey, what are all the ways in which we can get away from the zero sum kind of view of the world, of the economy, of communities and towns, right? Like, and it was really fun to literally put it into practice. Like in that moment, you're like, hey, actually, we have this cool experience, with a VIP person who we have a cool relationship with. Like, why don't we share that with you? And I was like, wow, that's great. So it's like, it was you seem, and I've heard wonderful things about you from mutual friends, of like, you are an authentic, totally values, serious, motivated person for all this stuff. Like I believe that already, but to come here and to have you be so generous and to be like, yeah, no, I'm serious about like weaving community and making connections and doing it. And then it's like, oh, by the way, let's do it right now.
Yeah.
So
no
fun.
better time than the present.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that worked. So to pick up on my thread, the reason I brought up the closing is we were talking about like, what does it mean to be positive? What does it mean to be optimistic? And that doesn't exclude kind of the wrestling and the messy middle that you have to do. And so that led me to talking about the closing, where in my view, something really vulnerable and transparent and beautiful came out of that messiness that we were having to wrestle with. And it nothing's ever perfect, but I think that some of the most beautiful solutions and some of the most beautiful positive steps forward come out of the wrestling and out of the messiness. And so there's a balance of not getting stuck in the messiness, but being comfortable with discomfort for periods of time, and being okay with saying, I don't know. Like there's a lot that I don't know about how we can try to employ some of the principles that we've talked about in pragmatic ways. But Wendell Berry
The great Wendell Berry.
I know, it's actually, I won't tell all the story, but I have had some like letter exchanges with him. Like we've written.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, just twice now, but it's my turn to write him back. And so
that's 2,000,000% more than me. I've never gotten a letter from Wendell Berry.
Well, it's taken me way too long to write back because I feel like I have to say something like really important or valuable. And I'm like, he's gotten every question. He's gotten everything. I don't know. So I've got to figure that out. But anyway, I was reading because I also haven't read enough of his stuff quite yet. So I was like reading some of his works just to see if I could try to frame my letter in a way that would be connecting. But he has an essay called The Commerce of Violence, and he talks about the immense intellectual and pragmatic effort that human beings will have to employ for all of human existence, and in order to create just societies that are essentially like ecologically and economically and socially like in harmony.
Yeah.
And he said something like that is...
It's not the rats and roaches quote, is it?
No, it's something like that would make being human worthy of it or something like that.
Sure.
I have it on my phone. But anyway, and so while we are always having these immense practical efforts here at Hannah Grimes and in our own lives as well, I feel like I'm in a stage of that immense intellectual effort to try to wrap my mind around some concepts, because if we only focus on the low-hanging fruit, right, the solutions that we can see the beginning and end of and touch and feel and grab, we might miss the big picture.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I'm spending a lot of time on, and I know others are too. I'm not the only one, of course. But being willing to step back, spend some time in the messiness while still doing what we can.
Right.
But knowing that that's going to birth and like these amazing and beautiful initiatives.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up Wendell Berry and everything. The quote I'm thinking of might be from the essay that you're referencing. I can't say for sure because I've read even less, and I'm sure you've read a substantial amount of Wendell Berry. But it's all the stuff you're talking about. I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't know it verbatim, but he says something like, "Rats and roaches live under the laws of supply and demand. It is the privilege of human beings to live under laws of dignity, justice, and fairness," or something to that effect. Right? Of like
we are more evolved than that, or like more like complex thinkers or something like that.
Yeah. Well, just this, this notion of people, and I understand what economists and such mean when they talk about supply and demand and marketplaces. And sure, there's a great mechanisms to derive value and solve some problems, right? But this whole notion that like we're so used to talking about them as though they're absolutes, right? Like it's written in the sky somewhere that like this is how it has to be. It's not there. Yeah. There's no one, God didn't take a magic marker and write in the sky that, the world has to be like this, right? It's not there. It's all made up. And that's a great thing, actually.
Yeah. And a lot of the transformations that I believe should take place, and a lot of folks believe should take place in our economy, they don't do away with free markets, right?
Yeah.
But it's many things, right? It's like, what measurements are you using for success? Are you including the informal economy and like where money exchanges aren't necessarily taking place, but people are caring for each other and distributing resources and things like that? Like, what can we do to create an economy that is in harmony? And it's like, it wouldn't make any sense to just be like, well, we said we're going to do this, so we're going to do this. And it doesn't matter what's happening. It doesn't matter who's being affected. It doesn't matter if things are going badly. We're just going to keep doing it.
Right.
It's like if the goal is to distribute resources within limits and take care of each other in the home of our planet that we're in, like we should work backwards from there.
Right.
And be like, what works in order to do that. And so like we have a marketplace, and providing market access and providing this way of life for folks that are utilizing it has been transformative for them. And doing this work with business owners and nonprofits and rural communities, like all of it matters and all of it adds up. But the lenses we're using when we look at it and how we make our decisions, that's where the nuance comes in. Like I don't know that there's ever going to be like a beautiful, pristine, laminated playbook for how to do this. But if we have anchoring values and guiding questions we're using to analyze our work and our everyday actions, and connecting with the folks like we just did with Maggie, who are helping to create conditions and create systems, like it's got to matter, right?
Yeah,
like it has to.
Yes, it does. I'm just gonna say it. I mean, it's an orientation, right? I like that very much, right? And this whole notion of like, I mean, process isn't the point, but like it can be a lot of the time. And this is my mind's just like swimming. A good friend of mine, one of his favorite quotes that I'm going to say again is, we don't sing because we're happy. We're happy because we sing, right? And it's like the action and the doing of the thing. It's like, no, you have to. Singing is what brings, the joy and the happiness. It's not a byproduct of the natural state of it's like it's inseparable from the choice to act and to make real your vision for something better, I guess.
But isn't it both? It's like that positive feedback loop, where it's like You sing because you're happy because you sing because you're happy. But once you start, it's
back.
like keeps going.
Yeah.
And that actually is like some of the books that I'm reading and just trying to understand. Actually, one of the quotes from Surviving the Future by David Fleming is, he said, in this world that he's imagining, it's simple. He's like, there will be time for music.
Yeah.
And to me, that matters so much, right? Some people make time for music now.
Right. Great.
But one of the things I wrote down to talk about, and I kind of alluded to earlier, was like efficiency, right?
Yeah.
Like in this age of modernity, like we're all about efficiency and making things faster and doing more of it and producing more for less and all this sort of stuff. But it's like, what are we doing with the time that's created?
Yeah.
And the labor that's reduced with this efficiency? We're doing more work.
Right.
So we say we work to live, but now we're just working like double time.
Yeah.
And our bodies might not be breaking down as quickly in some industries, right? With modern efficiencies and this, thanks to the industrial age and all that. I don't know if I'm using all the right words, but in a world, one version of the world that we could imagine, in some cases we may make the choice to use a machine that's more labor intensive.
Right.
Maybe it brings us more joy, more fulfillment. Maybe it is less energy intensive. Maybe that means we end up producing fewer things. Maybe we choose to like not work the majority of our waking hours and we choose to spend it on other things that are equally as valuable just because there's no monetary exchange, right?
Yeah.
Like caring for aging parents, playing music,
right.
Spending time with friends, stewarding the land. Like there's so much that we can do. So I think part of the issue with this compound growth that we have to keep up with, like the economy is like a bicycle that like if we stop, it falls over, right? And so we have to keep up with this compound growth. And in order to keep up with it, we have to create more and more and more efficiencies to produce more. And then, but like we're not slowing down with these efficiencies. Right. And it's not sustainable for us or from the world that we're extracting from.
Right.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't strive for progress. It doesn't mean we shouldn't, because it depends on how you define that, right? It doesn't mean that we shouldn't try new things or be creative or innovative. That's not what I'm saying. But what are we growing? There's a quote by Donella Meadows that, again, I'm not good at remembering quotes clearly, but like it's like how much growth, when is enough?
Yeah.
Who is affected by it? It's like that's why you have to ask those guiding questions. It's not just growth is good, growth is bad. It's not. That's a false dichotomy.
Yeah.
And like we have metrics that we use here. But we're working toward metrics that don't just include like growth by numbers, but it's like qualitative growth and that kind of lateral growth we were talking about. So let's see what else I got on.
Let's go down the list.
I know. You would love our solution slam at Radically Rural because
I love it already.
Yeah.
I'm going to be there.
And I guess the last thing I was going to say is one thing that I'm excited about is that are you familiar with the Aspen Institute?
It sounds familiar. Mm-hmm. I've definitely heard of it.
They're based in D.C. and kind of a think tank policy advocacy organization. And they have a division that's specifically focused on rural communities called Community Strategies Group. Mm-hmm. And we had them here, not this past summit, but the one before that. And we've kept in touch. They invited 50 leaders from across the country to come for 2 days to collaborate across all the states on issues related to rural America, and they invited me to come. Yeah. So I'm super excited. I'll be there in the beginning of March. And as an example of this sort of social weaving work and how that works on local, regional, and national levels and how it is that positive feedback loop, like I'm so excited to take the issues and conditions that we're experiencing here in New Hampshire, the innovations that we have, the beautiful goodness that we have right here, and take it and share it, and also learn when I'm there and bring back, what I can to help our community grow and thrive as well. And so, I'm hoping that afterward I'll be able to write some sort of blog or something and just kind of share my experience. But I want as much as possible to keep doing what I can do on every level to have reciprocity with our larger communities. And so, I just wanted to share the good news because this is all about good news.
Right. Yeah. Well, you're a great channel or a great channeler, right? That's kind of the feeling I get talking to you, right? Of just like you interact with all these people and businesses and organizations doing things, and you're just like you just take it in and it reflects off you, and you're just like, oh, weaving, you know? I mean, I'm just trying to make light of it.
It's kind of like art.
Yeah. No, it totally is. You're a community artist.
It feels like literally. That. And I do some painting, and one of the things and I intentionally don't watch like YouTube videos on technique and stuff like that because I have to live in my strategy brain like 98% of the time. And so if I can for a minute just do it and not have to be in my strategy brain, that's like really helpful for me. And so it does feel a little bit like that. Like with the painting, I just like all of a sudden I'll be like, I'm going to like use my fingers now, or like, I'm going to try this, or maybe that color will look good, you know? And it's like with the community weaving, sometimes it can feel like that. Like, and Lillian, our programs and development coordinator, she'll see me get that look on my face and I'll be like, there's something here. It's like this person and this person and this, and maybe we put in, you know, and it's just like, it feels like painting sometimes. And I know that many folks are like that. It's not just me, but it's a blast.
I love that so much because I think it's because I love all the quotes that we keep mentioning. It's fun. But no, really, it's I think it's Picasso. I don't know, but any of them could have said it. He said something like, he's like, I knew how to paint when I was a kid, and I've spent my whole life trying to remember how, right? Like this notion of unlearning. And it's similar, right? To like community, like there is all these ways that I think children, right, were born naturally curious, empathetic, hopeful, et cetera, right? And then like people lose these qualities, or rather the world beats it out of them, right, in one way or another. And, you know, so just like, I don't know, this connection between painting and what comes naturally to you versus like the optimal, more efficient way to maybe do, like, it's a very childlike, but in a brilliant, intuitive, like actually great kind of way of thinking of people and communities.
And I find that when I'm the most childlike in a sense, like I'm unashamed about my curiosity. I'm unashamed about my questions. I'm unashamed about saying what I don't know, or where I fall short. I find that that's where some of the best work happens, because when we're trying to mask or we're trying to do things in a particular way, like we can kind of miss the point in some ways. And I love what you said too, because one thing that I've noticed is a big part of my life used to be literally like physically looking up at the sky.
Right.
Like I used to tilt my head back and look up at the sky, like multiple times a day. I used to be driving home at night and I was just like, I have to look at the stars. And I would pull over and I would lay down and I would look up at the stars. And that used to be just like a regular part of my existence. I couldn't get enough.
Yeah.
And then a couple years ago, my daughter Magnolia, we were walking outside and she's like, Mom, look up. And I was like, when was the last time I like looked up? Like, it's just, it's like I've forgotten. And so I look, like I've learned from my kids every day, like, don't forget to look up. And there's so much to that. Like it puts us in perspective. It inspires us because we are nature. Like we are not separate from nature. And that division, whenever that happened hundreds of years ago, where we started thinking of ourselves as separate from nature, that really allowed us to extract and exploit and hoard and make ourselves more important than any other aspect, and we're not.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that your kid I'm sure that they get that from you in some way, right? Like, I mean, all children are curious, but I like the idea that like there's just a genetic, like more than the average person, right?
Yes,
and it's just like, and then you see your kid do it and you're like, oh yeah, I do like to do that. Thanks. You know, thanks for reminding me.
My kids are so curious and so capable, and they're my favorite people to spend time with. I love them so much. Yeah.
Oftentimes, and you know, this will be a good, I ask you my trademark closing question, right? But when I ask people what makes you optimistic, they're like, man, it's just like the kids, the children or young people, when I interact with them, like they're just so, they're so ready and willing and excited to be like molded and to be actionable and helpful and do all these things. And, you know, and I think we infantilize them too much sometimes, right? Like there's so much more capable, you know, I don't have children yet, but I'd like to. I'm very excited to. And I just like, I can't wait to like put them to work, but in a non-puritanical, stupid kind of way, you know, don't get the water just for the sake of fetching it, but like help me chop. Well, maybe don't chop wood when they're 4, but you know what I mean? Like, you know, the kids are so capable, they're so smart, you know, and they want to help. Like, and I lived in, no, I'm not going to share that.
I lived in Rwanda for a time, and that was before I had children. And I noticed like the ages that they were allowed to like walk themselves to school or use a knife or things like that. And I watched that for a while, and it was like, wow, I actually didn't know that kids could do those things. I just assumed that they couldn't. Like maybe they'd be walking to school and they wouldn't know the way and they would wander off, or they, you know, it was like, oh, they are actually capable of so much more. But so the question is, what makes you optimistic? Is that what it is?
Yes. And I didn't even ask it.
Go for it.
Juliana, what makes you optimistic about, I mean, are you an optimist? You seem like one.
I would say yes. I think I am. My staff would probably say yes. They like sometimes take it upon themselves to be like, Juliana, that's not going to happen. Like, let's come down a little bit. But yeah, I'm definitely a visionary. But I also am a hard worker and I get things done. You know, I don't just shove work off on other people. Like I delegate, but I work hard too. But I would say I am an optimist, but I do not shy away from the truth. I am obsessively curious and asking questions and facing the hard things, because I don't think you can have the beauty without that, the true beauty. You can skim on the surface of it, but you can't really feel it and just like from your gut. And I think what makes me optimistic is that there are wiser beings on the planet than humans. And I think if we can slow down long enough and pay attention, that we can relearn what we need to relearn. And there's people in our world that have been holding on to indigenous wisdom for hundreds of years, waiting until we're ready to hear it. And so it makes me optimistic that there's deep wisdom out there that is very old and more than I could come up with myself. And I'm trying to slow down long enough to listen. And that makes me optimistic that it's not up to us, these pretty young creatures in the planetary kind of scope of time. It's not up to us to figure it out all ourselves.
And it's there when we're ready, right? Man, well, I could talk to you all day, literally. I hope to interact with you more in some capacity for granted goodness, but you've been very generous with your time and your space and your community and your network and your mind and your ideas and everything today. So a very heartfelt thank you, Juliana.
And thank you.
This is really fun.
Yeah, thank you for giving our state this gift.
It's fun. I can't help it.
It is fun.
Hey there, thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator and host of Granite Goodness, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.